Do you struggle to say no to people who ask you for help? Or another way of putting this is, are you an overgiver? Yes. Is that your problem, my friend? It was certainly my problem. So I thought it was interesting because this came out of a conversation I had with a friend, and I realised, actually pretty much most of my friends are what you might call sort of sensitive people and prone to overgiving. And so I thought, it'll be interesting. Obviously, I've had that trait as well. I think I'll do a video about that one. Stay to the end because, I talk a bit about why we overgive and the problems it causes. But there's also a hidden cost to overgiving, and it's worth bearing this in mind in case you just think, maybe it's just easier to go with the flow and not change this, not make any effort to adjust this pattern or let it go. So why do we overgive? Well, essentially the way it would work for me is that, people would come and ask me for help, and being a sort of sensitive soul who was in touch with, very attuned to people's emotions, if they were upset about something, I'd feel like I really wanted to help. So there was already a strong desire there, I guess, an empathy that lent me to being helpful. And for me, obviously, I also grew up in a religious background, quite a fundamentalist religious background. So I got that programming, that we must help others, we must be kind, and all of those kinds of things. So I had that, I guess that, it was already bubbling away. But what happens is, with this sense of guilt that we get when someone asks us for help, and if we think about saying no, it's just like, well, I'll just feel so bad about myself because I've been taught that I need to be a good, kind person. And so, it's our programming basically that can set us up for this pattern, because if we're already sensitive to people's needs, we can, feel obliged, feel that, that's, we're told that that's who we should be. We should be kind, we should be giving, and we can overdo it because of our sensitivity. And then what happens when we don't help? We feel guilty. And so we just get into this pattern because we remember all the times we didn't help and then we just felt awful about it. That we just end up just saying yes automatically because it feels like the path of least resistance in that sense. But basically when you do this, it's a kind of over responsibility because you're taking responsibility for other people's happiness. And you're basically, it's like you're thinking, well, if someone isn't happy, if I can't make someone happy, then I'm a bad person. And obviously that's not the case. We're all adults and we are, once we become an adult, we're responsible for ourselves. So if you can't help someone, it's all fine for someone to come and ask you for help, but then they can ask someone else for help or try and find another solution. So actually we're not ultimately helping people if we are doing it from that place of obligation, because we're also potentially enabling them. We're doing something that doesn't feel good for us, but we're also taking responsibility for their feelings instead of letting them come up with another solution, tune into their own creativity. So, so guilt is one thing, and there can be a fear element too, and particularly if you've had a kind of traumatic upbringing, perhaps you had an angry parent or guardian, maybe even violent, and so it didn't feel safe to upset people. And so you've got that pattern of, I must make sure, because, you're obviously, as a baby, you're dependent on this parent or guardian for your survival. And so if they're upset with you, that's your food supply in jeopardy, that's your shelter and your protection in jeopardy. So it builds a real fear around upsetting people. And so people being angry with you or upset or even just disappointed can feel very threatening. So if that's the case, if you've got some trauma there, it's actually worth getting some help with that, either through sort of therapy or especially some kind of embodied kind of intervention. So something that works with the body to help you clear that pattern, which has now stored in your body and in your subconscious. So those are the kinds of reasons we sort of overgive. And like I say, if we've got that natural sensitivity towards people's feelings, then we're already primed for it in a way. And, the problem with this is, like I say, we're sort of taking responsibility that isn't ours. And there's a false premise that this is based on. And this is the premise that somehow our worthiness can go up or down, it can increase or decrease. That somehow if I say no to someone who asks me for help and they're upset with me, I'm less worthy of a person, so there can be a real sense of your goodness being in jeopardy as well. So it's not just necessarily that trauma-based response. It can be also if you've been taught, like for example, that you need to be a good person in order to go to heaven, then you can have that sense of, if I don't do good things, I'm not a good person because my worth is dependent on what I do. And that can also trap you in that. So if you've got that unworthiness thing, which pretty much most of humanity has, this false belief that somehow our worthiness varies dependent on what we do or don't do, then you're also, prone to feeling obliged to help, even if it doesn't feel resonant for you, even if it goes against your energy and your own boundaries and your own needs. So that kind of leads me on to the next thing. What problems does overgiving cause? Well, in the first instance, like I said, if you've got that guilt thing running, you're doing things because you think, well, I'll just feel guilty if I don't do it. So let me just help them move and spend my whole Saturday after an exhausting week, shifting their furniture. And I'm not pointing at this anyone in, these are random examples, so don't wonder if I'm, digging at anyone here. But it's so that guilt thing, what happens over time, if you keep doing things driven by guilt, then you start to build up resentment. You start to build up resentment against the people that you do things for. So, if you're in a scenario where you're continually overgiving to one person or a few people, what will happen over time is you'll build up resentment, and eventually it will come out. It will come out in drama, it will come out in anger. But there's also a resentment that builds up within you because you're kind of betraying yourself, basically. If you keep ignoring those signals that say, no, I need to rest, I don't want to go to that party, or I can't help them with that project right now because I've got too many other things going on. If you're ignoring that, you'll build a resentment against yourself, and you'll start to, experience the kind of pressures of that resentment. You'll project it out to people around you, whether they are specifically involved in the situation, are going to feel your stress. But equally, you'll start to turn against yourself. And also, you'll end up in prolonged situations that make you happy. Sensitive overgivers often stay in relationships much longer, unhealthy relationships much longer than they should. Or sometimes they never leave them. They spend their whole life in them, which is very draining and very toxic and not good for the other person either. But they just can't face leaving. And so that they just keep putting up with it. And so end up being really unhappy. And aside from that, the other thing is that it just drains your energy. It drains your energy to be constantly going against the grain, doing things that don't feel good to you, that don't feel aligned for you. And so you then run the risk of burnout. Well, that was my experience. I did so many decades of work that I just didn't enjoy. There were elements of it that I enjoyed, but so much of it that I didn't enjoy that eventually I just got burned out and had to quit. And so, you can get stress-related illness as well, because if you think every time you're ignoring that signal within yourself, you're releasing stress hormones, the epinephrine, the cortisol. It's all coursing around your system and creating havoc in your body. It can mess up your digestion. So you can get these chronic conditions developing, not just immediate, not only does it just immediately lower your immune system, stress when you experience it. But over a prolonged period of time, it starts to compromise your health, and you can get these chronic conditions. And eventually, if you continue to ignore what you're doing to yourself, then you can actually develop disease as a result. So, there are some strong reasons not to give in to this pattern if you are experiencing it. And I'm sure you'll have your own reasons as well. But so what about this hidden cost that I talked about? So what is that? Well, it's funny because in a way, the biggest cost to you is not what actually happens to you. So all the things that I've described and that you will be able to, share yourself with other people. If you are an overgiver, you'll be familiar with this, but it's what doesn't happen, as a result of having this pattern in your life. And basically it's this: you never get to live as the real you. You never live as the real, authentic you. You don't show up in your life as you. Why? Because you're always ignoring your desires. You're ignoring your natural inclinations. You're ignoring what matters to you. If you're staying in a toxic relationship just because you don't want to upset the other person, you're ignoring your own truth. Because your truth, your heart is saying, this isn't good for me. This isn't a reflection of who I am. And so by ignoring that, you're not honouring who you are. You're not living as you. Because what happens when we're giving to everybody else, we're letting everybody else decide where we place our energy and where we place our focus. And what does that mean? We're torn. We're all over the place. We're trying. No wonder we get burned out, because we're constantly pulled in so many directions. We're not being focused. We're not being conscious about how we're using our energy, how we're using our time. What are we investing in? Not just emotionally, but financially. Where's your money going? Does it reflect your values? Or are you just doing a whole heap of stuff because, your culture or your family or your partner or your friends tell you that that's what you should be doing? This is what the Profoundly Silly Wisdom channel is all about. It's to help us move from these shoulds to actually living as our authentic self. So going back to that point, you never get to live as you, the real you, and reflecting in your life what you really care about. You don't experience the joy of being you. So what is a fulfilling life? I talk a lot about moving from life as an endurance test to life as a joyful adventure. How do you do that? Well, you're not going to do it while you're running after everyone else and ignoring your own needs. How do we live a fulfilling life? A fulfilling life isn't about a perfect life, of having it all at once, which isn't realistic. A truly joyful life is one that reflects who you are, one where you get to focus on things that have meaning to you, that fill your life with a sense of purpose. Because it's amazing how resilient we can actually be when we have a sense of purpose. The purpose is what carries us through difficult times, but it's also what inspires us creatively. We bring things into the world when we have, things of significance, things that of significance to us. It doesn't matter if no one else, if other people don't value it, but it's about living from your own values, which is deeply fulfilling. And so, if you are handing away your power to everyone else, letting everyone else decide what you give and when and to whom, then the world never really gets to know who you are. And what does that mean? It never really knows the unique person that you are, because we're all unique. There are 8 billion souls on this planet. Each one is different. And I know we spend so much time judging and telling everyone else how they should live and what they should look like. And, there's so much judgment at the moment. But if we could tune in to the fact that actually our uniqueness is a gift, not something that we need to feel threatened by, but it's something to be cherished. And the world will never get to know the real you. The world will never experience your real essence. And you won't tune into and develop your natural gifts and talents, which is where so much of your joy comes from. first and foremost for your own joy, yes, the things that you love doing, but also when you are in that energy, you radiate out that positivity, you radiate charisma. Just think about someone in your life, or someone famous who you consider charismatic. What is it about them? They're people who are passionate. They're people who are focused, who are dedicated to something they believe in. And that's, and if they have that joyful way about them, it's because they're using their natural talents, the things that they just naturally do well and therefore enjoy doing. It doesn't feel like coming back to the endurance testing, it doesn't feel like an endurance test. Oh, I've got to get through this. They're actually enjoying themselves, artists, painters who are just expressing their creativity. And we are all creative. So basically your creativity doesn't come through into the world. And it never gets to know, you never get to know, and the world never gets to experience who you really are. So that is the hidden cost. And that's why, it's so wonderful if you can commit yourself to living as your authentic self, because that is actually living as opposed to just existing. But, if you are in that situation where you've spent your life giving to everyone else and you've kind of lost touch with who you are, maybe you've never really felt connected to yourself since you were a child, well, just start where you are. You don't have to do anything majorly dramatic. Maybe look at an area where you are overgiving, and just see, where you can start to let go of some of these things that you're saying yes to. Just let go of the things that don't feel in flow for you. And how do you know what feels in flow for you? Well, you feel it in your body. Someone asks you to the party and you just go, oh God. You might not say that out loud, but you feel it. You might feel it as a dragging in your stomach, a contracting feeling, your energy sinks. You will know for yourself. And actually I've got a video on that, about how to tune into what your yes and your no feel like for you, so that you can start to become more aware of where you're focusing on things that just aren't aligned with your authentic self. So start small. So don't beat yourself up if you're in that situation, but just know that the authentic you is there. Your soul is there the whole time, waiting for expression. And if you'll start to notice these little ways in which you're giving away your power and giving away your attention and focus to things that are not aligned for you, and you start then to have a bit more space to focus on the things that are. And again, you may be quite far from knowing exactly what sets you alight. What sets me alight? What's my bliss? So some of us are so far from bliss. It's just like we can't even relate to that because we don't even have time to think. So it's, again, start small, start where you are, just start noticing the things that feel exciting to you, and again, that can be a buzzy feeling, it can be a light feeling. Just start noticing, and the more you can start letting go of those things that are not aligned with your authentic self, that are not true for you, and you can start doing more of the things that are, the more of you that you're going to be living, and the more fulfilling your life is going to be in the long run. So I hope you found that helpful. I have a little reframe about this. We talk about givers and takers, and we can all identify, most of us tend towards one more than the other. Obviously, we all have both, but we can all identify people that we consider takers. And they usually hang around the overgivers, because the overgivers are quite useful for help me out. Go to the overgiver. They'll help me out quickly. So we know this, we have this sense of giving and taking. But what I want to do is reframe this idea of giving, because I'm not trying to make you into a selfish person. So if you're concerned about becoming selfish as a result of prioritizing your true self, then I want you to see it like this. Instead of being a giver, why not be a bringer? And what do I mean by that? Well, the bringer of your true essence, the bringer of your soul energy, the bringer of your heart, the bringer of your spirit, however you want to conceptualize it, of your enthusiasm for life. And you can't do that if you're not connected to who you are at the, fundamental level. And what's the difference? When someone is connected to who they are, they have that charisma, they bring energy. They're not drained and exhausted and, croaky and angry and everything else. They bring energy, they lift people up by their presence. They have that magnetism to them. So instead of thinking of, I've got to give to people, because what you do when you give some energy and then you've got less, or someone takes it from you and you've got less. But when you are tuned into your heart, you're basically channeling your soul. You're channeling your creative energy, and you're connected to the wider creative energy, the wider field. And so therefore, when you attend an event, you're bringing energy to that event, and people experience that viscerally. So instead of trying to be a giver because you think, I've got to be a nice person, be you, because the best gift that you can give to the world is the gift of yourself. So I hope you found that helpful. If you did, then please like the video so more people see it, and share it. Please share it if you know anyone who struggles with this. I know most of my friends do, and I'm doing this for myself as well. And also, if you want support with this, with connecting to your true self, because I know these are very grandiose sounding terms, aren't they? But how do you do that? How do you tune into the real you? If you want to answer that question, and if you want to discover this with other people, then join the mailing list below, join the Profoundly Silly Wisdom community, because not only do I share these videos, but I share further teachings on how you can connect to yourself. Hopefully you found that helpful. Be a bringer of your energy, my friend. You are unique and you are special. I will see you on the other side.